Are there any members of the public who would like to ask a question at this particular time? I take it not. Apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, from Councillor Jamie McCauley and Councillor Jason Mack is unable to log in from his castle on the hill.
Take the problems up there. Thank you very much, Clark. Any declarations of interest from any members on any items on tonight's agenda? No, thank you very much. Item 3, minutes of previous meetings, the Town Council meeting on the 10th of August 2020 for approval. Could I have a proposer, please, for approval?
I'll propose that.
Councillor Toogood, thank you. Councillor Toogood, and a seconder, please.
I'll second that.
Councillor Lucas, thank you very much. I'll take that as passed. And for information on the planning committee meeting of the 1st of September 2020. We read directly on to item number 4, the finance report. The clerk, please.
Thank you, Chair. The usual format for the finance report tonight, with the reporting date of the 31st of August, when the Town Council's funds totaled 348,485, and the bank accounts were reconciled to that amount at that date. Payments during August totaled £33,429, with 7,455 of that coming from the Salisbury Gardens account. And for members' information, I've noted that those payments included one of the twice yearly payments of £4,753 against the Public Works Loan Board loan. The full list of payments is attached as usual for members' information. Receipts during August total 13,489, with 9,438 of that being the total of Salisbury Gardens rent collections during the month. Finally, the year-to-date variances, the list of payments and receipts against preset budget lines for what's now the first 5 months of the financial year are attached as usual, and they show that the payments in the period were 14,723 less than budgeted for, and receipts over the month were £5,430 higher than budget. Thank you, Chair. That's the finance report for this month, or last month, as the case may be.
Thank you, Clark. Any questions of the clerk in relation to the finance report?
No, none at all.
Could I have a proposer of acceptance, please?
I'll propose that, Florence Chair.
That's a too good. Seconder, please.
I'm happy to second.
Councillor Poppett, thank you very much, Clark.
Thank you.
And moving on to the new public toilets at the Central Car Park, for the benefit of members, as I think you all do, a little bit building regulations have now come through in that. So I think we're now in a position that we weren't in at least last month. Clark?
I think it's perhaps best if Councillor James Toogood brings us up to date with that, Chair.
You, Jim?
Yes, Chair. Basically,
You were a bit worried, Jim, about that. The building regulations taking a long time, but it seemed to have come through a bit quicker than we thought originally, didn't you? Maybe that's because you weren't around.
the problem I've got really, I'm trying to take the pressure away from me, and the contract and the items are getting quite complicated. So I spoke to David Bartlett, and I suggested that we went to Roger Orchard for a complete specification of work, so everyone's priced like for like. We put an awful lot on the plans, but I've got my doubts if there's enough on there really. So by going to Roger Orchard, he wants £1,500 to prepare a specification of work under the JCT small works contracts. And then I went on a little bit further now. Rather than me do site visits and look at valuations when they come in, I found it was better if Andrew Hitt done it. Then basically it keeps me out of it. And Andrew Hitt to do a site meeting, which he reckons he definitely needs to do one a week, wants £40 for each site meeting. Also, what he'll do, he will, when we have an interim payment in, he'll go and do a valuation to make sure the money has been asked for, the value of the work's been done. So what I'm trying to do is protect myself, quite honestly, and Ventnor Town Council. I just think it's getting a bit too close, really.
Yeah, I just wonder if that's something that we should have considered earlier on in the process or not, Councillor Toogood. I mean, I'm speaking as a layman. I'm not an engineer or an architect or any of those things, but we seem to be fairly well down the path now.
Yeah, I think you're right, really, but the whole thing has got more complicated with the specification on materials, and we need to make sure we got like for like, value for money. So the thing has grown. I don't think it's grown in cost, but it's grown in complications because we've got things like the build control officer has asked to dig out alongside the retaining wall and to see what the foundations have got there. So quite frankly, it needs to be supervised and run by people by myself. And I think if I carried on as I am, I reckon people could point the finger at me. And that's certainly what I don't want. Yeah.
So are you saying that these things could not have been foretold before now? They're just something that's come out as a result of the work that's been done in the planning process and the buildings regulation process?
I think some and some, Stuart. I think where it's so complicated, like I just said, with materials, I just think it's too complicated for me to run it and to be to look fair. And I just think it's too dangerous for the town to have a member of a council controlling it. And just say, for instance, two of the builders I know quite well, and if one of them gets it, I don't want anyone pointing the finger at me, quite honestly.
Okay.
That's the way I've looked at it, and I think it's the right way to go too.
Yeah, sure. Members, would you like to come in at this juncture?
Can I say I thought that Mr. Hitt was going to be drawing up this specification. If he isn't, I think it's very important that somebody is, because the essence of these sort of contracts is to have a figure that you let as a contract and know that that is your commitment. You don't want a whole string of extras where people go along and say, well, that wasn't really specified and therefore I've done something slightly different. So I really do support having a QS doing a specification which goes right down to the last stainless steel screw, because then there's no doubt, and the figure we agree is the figure we pay.
Yeah. By QS, Councillor Lucas, you mean a quantity surveyor? Is that what you mean?
Yes, quantity surveyor, QS. Yeah.
Yes.
No, thank you for that.
Yeah, just to be clear, that was all.
But basically, what's happened, Stuart, is that we got into it, and I put a lot of work with Andrew here, put as much as we can on the plan, and we both agreed this is not enough. Like Councillor Lucas just said, we've got to have people pricing like for like, and we don't want any extras. So I personally think it's my personal opinion is money well spent.
And in terms of time, what we're talking about here before we actually see a hole being dug in the ground, if indeed we do.
I'm waiting for Roger Orton. I'll ring him tomorrow again. I've got a meeting with Roger Orton to hand all my stuff over. Roger probably want a week and a half, and I would have thought. So I would like to think we could put it at the tender the first week of next month. Tenders, I would have thought, would take 3 weeks.
October.
Yeah, I think so, Stuart. That's what we need to look for, really.
Councillors, anybody else like to come in here? Councillor Milford.
Thank you, Chair, and I'm pleased we're making such progress, and absolutely agree that we should specify as much detail as we possibly can so that we're getting a like-for-like comparison with the tenders. I just want to ask a question as to where we are with the Isle of Wight Council and their proposal to charge us for the spaces, because that does still seem to be a bit of a showstopper to me. If we can't get an agreement for a reasonable rent from them, we can go ahead with the building and then be landed with a very sizable ongoing cost that we didn't really want to have to incur.
Sure. Clark?
As you know, Chair, that was raised by you in the meeting we had with Councillor Gary Peace,
Yeah.
and he agreed that it was unreasonable, the current proposed charge, and he said that he would follow it up and question it with his colleagues and come back to us, which we would expect him to do at the next meeting, which is the last Monday of this month.
Of this month, yeah. It's just the time is going on again, isn't it? It's just, as Councillor Milford says, we really need to have an answer to this question before we do start putting holes in the ground. Okay. Steve, does that answer your question for the moment? Thank you. Councillors, anybody else at the moment, this juncture?
Can I ask if we are incorporating any COVID safety measures into this toilet now that we know the problem and it's going to be fairly long term?
The only things we can operate, Brian, we are looking at putting no handles on the toilets, just touch, or you just wipe your hand by it and the toilet flushes. Where we found out we can increase the water supply on the Wargate water heaters, etc. So people spend longer time washing their hands. We've put in drains, gullies inside each toilet, so they can be actually hosed down if need be. Like simple things. Under the door, we're going to have a gap of about 50 mil. So if they get into a hose them down, it run out under the door if it don't run it down the drain. And quite honestly, Brian, I can't see what else we can do.
No.
Unless you've got some ideas to come up with.
No, but sanitising and washing is the key to it, isn't it?
It is really, Brian, yeah. And the walls will be tiled, and the tiles, walls and floors will have a grout which is got a resin in it. So it won't absorb, put it bluntly, any piss. Actually, I can put it, it won't absorb anything at all. So the walls and floors will be easy to scrub.
I don't think that needs any transcribing, does it?
Not. It will be easier.
No. Thanks. It's just pretend I'm stupid for a minute. Some might think I am, Councillor Too Good, but just by what route did we get to the quantity surveyor? How was the person that was chosen by either you or Mr. Hitt, or a combination of both, arrived at? Because it's something, the reason I asked this question is because we're talking about procurement, and we have been for a while, and standing orders. It's something that we want to not happen again, no matter what size the contract is, that we ought to take things like this into consideration at the planning stages of anything going forward here from here on in. So if you just for the benefit of members again, Jim,
not a problem.
Just walk us through that again.
So I've worked with several quantity surveyors, and I still do. I don't just work with Roger, I work with quite a few from Cuddy House, etc. But I find Roger, he's easier to get on with, and he's very practical. That's the reason I suggested we would go to him. Others are a lot more expensive, and we like to do a lot of flanneling, which is all we want is practicalities, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Not a lot of bullshit, putting it bluntly, really. That's the reason I've gone to him.
Right, okay. Well, thank you for that, Jim. Just clarified that. So we are where we are in this project at the moment. There's nothing we can say here or take forward until the first thing we need to know is what the council's decision is going to be regarding the car parking spaces and the costs involved there. Before the project, I'll come to you in a second, call me, I see you there. Before we sort of move on in any capacity. Sorry, Councillor Watling, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Just
Yes, no problem. You probably couldn't see my hand. It's too dark in here.
Yeah, a bit dark, I have to say. Yeah. And,
Yeah, I think it's absolutely brilliant that we're taking steps to make sure that we're seen to be doing the right thing. It remains a council responsibility, a council taxpayers' money that we're spending. We just need to be careful that we're clear on the difference between delegation of responsibility and abrogation of responsibility. You know, and we need to make sure that there is, you know, a clean break between the elected councillors, the council staff, and the people that are working on our behalf. Okay.
yeah, thank you. Okay, so we will no doubt return to this in October.
Yes.
So if we can move on now then to number 6, which is Belgrave Road, which is I think Councillor Cockett has distributed a little paper on this about his views, and I found myself agreeing with him, which don't be taken by surprise by that, but it just seems to make sense that, having lived here, Belgrave Road's always been used as a rat run, hasn't it? As a shortcut, and not even a very quick shortcut between the Rex and the Eversley Hotel, and I think that might be a sensible solution, would be just to pedestrianise it, really from the get-go before any serious monies are committed there. Stephen, let you come in here.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so everything's in the paper, really. To my mind, it's a fairly straightforward case. What I'm concerned about is that the council and Island Roads will suddenly appear with a pre-packaged solution that doesn't necessarily offer taxpayers particularly good value for money and doesn't enhance the town in any way. I would imagine that to repair the road for pedestrians, cyclists and mobility scooters, of which there's an increasing number in the town, it's going to run into hundreds of thousands of pounds, whereas to repair it for cars could run into millions. And I can't see it being a good spend. That's it, really. The only other point was, as Stuart did mention to me before, about a lack of consultation for the residents. Very obviously, you know, this also needs to be taken into account. But I think we should, if the council's in agreement, I think we should at least field the idea so that it's on the radar of the council. Okay.
Is there, remind me, and maybe Councillor Toogood will know more about this than I do, because you have a house on Belgrave Road, Jim. Is there a Southern Housing Group complex there looking after people?
No, no.
And I just wondered about egress and access with that. I seem to remember canvassing up there in Ventnor West, which is part of, and that just was lodged in the back of my memory.
I mean, the residents welcome it. The concern, I mean, I do too. I've been nice and quiet down there.
No, I'm not asking, sorry, Jim, I'm not, let me take you back a bit. I'm not asking from that point of view about the rest. I'm just talking about this particular aspect of it. Is there for a want of a better word, sheltered accommodation in one of the units up there that might, this might affect? No. Okay, that's the only thing I wanted to know.
The only thing I like to throw into it, Stuart, we're going to have to be made somewhere down the bottom for cars to turn around. And the problem we're receiving at the moment, like delivery lorries are going down and having to back up. So this has got to be bearing in mind, hey, how we're going to turn cars around, but the size of the lorries will not be allowed down there. Really, deliveries, because they're either backing down or backing up, which is quite dangerous.
Yeah, Councillor Milford.
Thank you, Chair. Just what would happen in the longer term if we don't carry out some more structural repairs to the road in terms of making it at least a bit more accessible for vehicles. I'm just thinking at some point in time, people along there are going to want to move, and it's going to need like removal vans, and might be need for ambulances or even fire engines to go down there. So at some point in time, that road does have to be improved that may be more structurally safe for some vehicles at some times.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I understand that, but the engineers amongst you will know how better to answer that question than I do. So what you're saying, Steve, is really that even if it went to sort of a pedestrianisation state, then it would have to be sufficiently capable of taking the weight of emergency vehicles and other vehicles going up and down the road, notwithstanding the fact that it's only been used as a pedestrianised area. Yeah, sure. And whether that would, you know, unmitigate the mitigation, if you like, of saving the money on it, it's not a question I can answer, obviously. But if any of you know better than me, feel free to say. Do any other councillors have a particularly pro or anti view on this?
No, I think it would be brilliant, and it would also, we could put bicycle racks along there because we really need those in the town. I'm sure you've all realised we've got gazillions of people dressed up in latex every weekend, and they've got nowhere to put their bikes. That would be a great place. And we could put some really nice seating along there as well. I understand about, obviously, rubbish lorries and things like that, because I live on a very unmade road in the middle of the woods. Well, you know, if we can't, for some reason or rather, get the dump truck near to the house, well, we just have to take our bins up the road temporarily. I mean, you know, that's the way it has to be. There are lots of places in Ventnor, I can think of quite a few, quite near some of your houses, where it'd be almost impossible to get an ambulance down. But you know, they manage it, don't they? So I think we you know, for the sheer economics of this, and also improving the town, I think it would be a really, really good thing to do, actually.
Yeah, sure. Getting back to what, thanks, Stephen. Getting back to what Councillor Toogood said about cars having to reverse or having to change the route. I was at a function at the Rex a couple of weeks ago, just over a week ago, with some other councillors there, and actually we saw that happening in real time. A couple of cars did come along, obviously for some reason weren't paying attention, but suddenly found that they couldn't go any further, and thought, oh, how are we going to get back out of this? Because the rock, the protection on the pavement at the other side makes it virtually impossible to do a 3-point turn there. It really is very difficult, but that would be something that obviously the roads would have to look into. Ian, Councillor Brown, did you want to come in there?
Yeah, I mean, the only point I was going to make is the other issue, obviously, is and I apologise for the Wi-Fi here isn't very good, so I might be breaking up on myself. The houses nearest the landslip will be mostly worried about it being made properly secure so that their houses are safe from any further incidents, and it may well be that the structural work needed to make it properly secure will effectively make it strong enough for vehicles. So Stephen's point about it being cheaper just to patch it up for bicycles and pedestrians may actually not be right. I don't know, but clearly it's important that the road is secure and it's not going to have further slippage there. Yeah. I mean, the other key point obviously is consultation. I mean, the Royal Hotel would have a very strong interest. Probably a number of other businesses in the area as well as the residents. I think the most we could do is suggest that the Isle of Wight Council consults people on it. I don't think I would be very wary of reaching a view without having the view of the emergency services and all the other interested parties.
And also, Councillor Bond, I don't think that it's a decision that we would make in any case. It's something that would have to be done by the local ward member, who's also a cabinet member. Isle of Wight Council and Island Roads working together. Whether they would pay any attention to what we as a town council think about it would be another matter entirely. But I think really what we really need to do here is get a feel amongst the members here whether we would be willing to ask Isle of Wight Council to consider that at least as a potential solution to the problem, provided the financial and engineering aspects can be mitigated. Councillor Lucas.
Yeah, I think this is a golden opportunity to make a really good feature for the town, because that particular stretch, as you drive down it on the Rat Run, you glance at the most fabulous view over the sea, and we could make that into a mini plaza, really. In terms of vehicles, if you want vehicles to come in occasionally, you can have these locking bollards which enable people to come in as they need to, but don't allow general traffic. And I think the important thing is to sort of put the ideas in front of Island Roads, perhaps with a sketch as to how we would see it. Otherwise, you know, they think in engineering terms, and we have an opportunity of thinking in purely sort of social and entertainment terms for the residents and visitors. So maybe we need a sketch to show how it could be, and put it to Island Roads so that they don't charge off and do an engineering solution rather than something which suits us and gives us a real big amenity for the town.
Yeah, a very good point. So, councillors, anybody else like to come in here? Councillor Logan.
Yes, I'll go along very much with what Ian said, that the consultation is very important, because there is at least 2 houses that have driveways for cars, you know, that are completely blocked off at the moment, so we need to move them. And also, whilst I'm quite happy to put the idea of Councillor Cockett's solution there, I'd be very careful to only put it as a suggestion. I would be loath to be giving the Isle of Wight Council a cheap option out, if you know what I mean, when that might not be the most agreeable or most sustainable solution. So I think whilst I would go along with the idea of putting forward and fielding this idea, I think we have to do it in a very careful manner. It just says, you know, pending all the engineering stats agree.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thank you very much. Okay then, well, my suggestion at this juncture would be that it seems to me that we're all thinking along the same lines, that we ask the clerk to come up with the formal words, just saying that would have Island Roads and Isle of Wight Council considered that this may be a solution to the problem, and if they haven't, is it something they would consider or not going forward? They might just turn around and say, no, we're bringing the road back up to spec, but there's no timetable, there's no budget, there's nothing as far as I'm concerned, as far as I can see. Unless, David, do you know any different about that?
No, Chair, I don't.
No, I didn't think you would.
Yeah, I'm not sure they do either.
But it could be another, you know how long Castle Road took and other places. I mean, years and years and years. The bus route never got reinstated. There was all sorts of, you know, going on up there when we were talking about the bus service and everything else. So, you know, it could take them just as long again. But now that we're talking about, and depending on how the traders got on in their discussions with Island Roads about the town centre, why don't we have a plan that marries everything into everything else, really, rather than do it piecemeal?
Stuart, can I come in there? Down the bottom of our road, right outside where the land has gone, we have a very clever engineer, very clever man. I mean, he would be willing to help us come up with a scheme and design something. He's tried. He used to be stitching buildings together. He is a very clever man. He would do it for nothing for us.
Yeah.
To work with us. Yeah. I mean, like, he's so clever. He used to go out and stitch up the pyramids and stuff to stop them falling apart anymore. He's amazing. Amazing guy.
Ventnor should be a mere ton of his sleep for somebody like that. Then
I know Steph was on the other day, and he would do something free of charge to work with us.
It might be you could ask them, Jim, if you could come up with a simple drawing or something like that, and just jot some ideas down in paper. Maybe we could bring it to the next ASWG group and then take it from there.
But it'd be good for him to talk to Stephen, really, wouldn't it?
Yeah. And
Delia just come up with some really good ideas, and so's Brian.
Yeah, sure.
I can ask him if you like.
I don't have any problem with that at all. Thanks, Jim. I think that would be a good idea. So we'll leave it at that there for the time being.
Okay, I'll drop in an email.
But it is something that we're taking quite seriously. And thanks, Councillor Cocker, for bringing it to our attention.
Thank you.
Okay, number 7 on the agenda, staff appointments. Back to the clerk.
Yeah, sorry, Chair.
Yeah, sorry.
So, I think it needs a resolution of some kind at this stage. And the recommendation on the paper follows Councillor Cockett's original paper. I'll read it to you and see if you want to amend it, if that's all right with you.
Yeah,
It currently reads, the clerk be asked to request the Isle of Wight Council's Highways Department to consider a non-vehicular reinstatement, and the Town Council be formally consulted in the development phase.
yeah. Any comments on that from members?
Well,
But
I will
think-
propose it.
I think we ought to push the idea that we do see it as an amenity area rather than just a non-trafficked area, which is quite a bit different.
Yeah.
There's a lot to that, Brian. I noticed when we were all up there at Columnston a little while ago, and I walked past there probably in my new regime probably 3 or 4 times a week. And a lot of people use that little seated area there underneath the wrecks because it's always overflowing with rubbish. So it's very, very well used indeed. But then again, that brings its own problems in terms of management of the rubbish and everything else. But it's not an insurmountable problem, I don't think. Okay, so Steve, you agree with what the clerk said there. Anybody dissenting with that approach? Okay, clerk, make it so.
Well, Councillor Stephen Cockett has proposed it, I think. I could do with a second.
A seconder.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Chair.
Anybody against?
No.
Oh, thank you very much. Okay, you never got away with that easy, David. Back to the staff appointment.
Staff appointments, Chair. This is information for the record primarily. There have been 3 appointments of staff since the last Town Council meeting, and I thought it was important to record it formally. The Youth Project Officer to replace Matt Hitt, who left us a month or 2 ago. Jordan Royal has been appointed to that post starting on the 21st of September. As I've noted on the paper, she's been one of the Town Council's 2 sessional youth workers since September 2016, so she knows the territory really well. She's also highly qualified in safeguarding, which is of comfort to me and I'm sure to you as well. We also appointed an additional cleaner in response to the extra demands of COVID-19 and the increasing cleaning time that's come with that. That was done, as you're aware, members, following an email circular which asked for approval, or at least no disapproval of that. I took action on the basis of that email circulars and the responses to it, and Tom Brandt has been appointed to that post. And it's a temporary appointment until the 31st of March 2021. And that's made it possible to reopen the Marlborough Street public toilets, as you know, from last Friday. And finally, Catherine Hammond has been appointed to the vacant post of mental health support worker. This is the 3-hour-a-week appointment for someone to lead the Anxiety Cafe group, which grew out of the Isle of Wight Council's cancellation of its off-site mental health support structures. So those 3 have all signed up, or been signed up, and now members of staff. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Any questions of the clerk on the staffing? Well, I wish them all the very best, and let's see how things progress from here on. I hope they fit into your tight little team seamlessly, Clark. I'm sure they will do. I'm sure they will. Okay, planning for the future consultation. This is arisen out of the government's stated intention of ripping to shreds the planning regime, throwing the red tape into a big bucket, probably down the end, and lighting the whole thing on fire and having a big party to celebrate. Easily done, isn't it? but certainly not here in Isle of Wight, not so easily done as Councillor Lucas and I have been corresponding over the golf club's plans recently, and nothing is easy as far as certainly this part of the island is concerned. So certainly our MP Bob Seeley doesn't agree with these paymasters in this instance, and he's going to be making representations. So we have to decide how, if at all, we are going to respond and make our views known as a town council to the government's plans, which are a bit woolly at the moment because we don't know exactly what they are. Unless, Clark, you have anything on the inside?
But we do know what they are, Chair. I've given you a link in the paper.
Yeah, but when I say that, I'm just assuming that nobody's trawled through the.
Oh, I'm sure they have, Chair.
Well, I'm usually quite good at that, but even I haven't done that. So you tend to lose the will to live. Well, sorry, I was just about to add to that. There are loads of schemes on the island which have planning permission, especially with regard to housing bills and everything else, and not a brick has been laid yet. And you know, speculators and contractors are sitting on acres and acres and acres of land on the Isle of Wight, and I would presume elsewhere, and not building anything on them. So I'm just wondering, A, if they're needed, and B, if they're needed in the places that they say they're going to be. But that's just my personal view. Sorry, did you say something else?
Chair, yes, I just wanted to add a reminder to members that there's no rush to develop a response because the consultation is open until the 29th of October. And I think it would be useful to see the Island MP's response before we commit anything finally.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
He was in conversation, so it was announced, as you may have noted in the press release yesterday, with the council leader about the response to this plan. Bob Seeley himself said at the last meeting for town and parish council reps that I attended that he will oppose this white paper right up to, but not beyond, losing the whip because of his opposition. He is very, very angry about it. That was evident. So it might be worth waiting till our next meeting before formalising.
Yeah, sure. I don't have any angst about that, and I give the ASWG a chance to have a say about it as well. But it's something that, as you know, historically, I don't get involved in planning matters because it's suicidal as far as I can see. You just don't. Brian and Jim will know this more than anybody. You just don't win in these situations. So it's something that has to be dealt with a delicate hand, I suppose. Does anybody want to come in here before we move on? Brian,
can I just chip in?
Yeah.
After you, carry on, Jim.
What I've looked at it briefly, and it's ridiculous. It's not going to come off because what it would allow you to do, you'd have a nice cul-de-sac of bungalows. You get a family move in the middle of it, and then they can just build a two-story extension on the back, looking over all the other bungalows like a watchtower. It's not going to work. And I've spoken to a couple of architects. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous, Joe. And it contradicts itself in many parts. It says you can do it, and then further in, it says, well, you've got to abide by this rule, that rule. It's stupid, actually stupid. Yeah. It really, and it's terrible. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes, can I chip in there?
Yeah, Brian.
This planning law is going to split everything into three. The major section, which we're all worried about, is what they call growth areas suitable for substantial redevelopment. And it's an area where the planners won't have a lot of control. We as a town council need to be involved in the establishment of those areas, because otherwise we'll just sit there and watch everything happen that we don't want. The second section is where the planners deal with it in the normal way. And the third section is sacred areas that SSSIs and things that you can't build on. So that first section, which is free for all for anybody, any developers who want to build, we need to be involved in that, because otherwise they might set a whole of our section of our town is uncontrolled as far as we're concerned.
Yeah, I understand that. Thank you, Brian.
I mean-
Anybody else? Sorry, Dillian.
I'm very interested in Brian's comment about sacred areas because I'm still so incredibly angry about the development of the AONB opposite my house. A very scurrilous amount of backroom behaviour there. But this goes on the Isle of Wight all the time, and he's absolutely right. We do have to keep an eye on these things because these things happen, and then we all turn around and go, "How did that happen?" Don't they? We've got to do that, and we live in this fabulous place. Luckily, there are not many places you can build on around Ventnor, are there?
No,
That's-
really. Well, my personal, and I've had quite a lot of personal dealings with planning locally through my association with the golf club dealing is that, which is completely enclosed in an AONB and a triple SI, and it's on the Heritage Coastline and the Rue Valley Nature Reserve, and it's practically impossible to get planning permission for anything, even to dig a hole in the ground to have a pier up there without objections. And I'm going back now, 20 years, so I've got quite a history there. I think, I'd be interested to see how people think that they're going to open. Certainly, the South Wight is going to be opened up to developers. I just think it'll be an impossible thing for them to manage. But then again, under this government, I suppose nothing's impossible. They have a majority of 80, so they can more or less do what they want, as they're proving tonight, by the way. But that's another thing.
I haven't seen what happened yet. Yes, but we can't do that. I mean, I'm pretty horrified. About 100 super trawlers are being spotted off our coast.
I just watched that on South News. Yeah.
I mean, come on, I hear them at night. I've been complaining about them. I have complained to all sorts of people about the engines at night thundering around here. They have done nothing. And now we discover that they have been actually destroying our oceans right in front of us all, And that is just not the only thing that's going on. But as I said, luckily, Ventnor has got a built-in contingency plan.
No.
That half of it might fall off if you built too much. But
I think it's crucial, as Brian says, that we do have an input into it. Again, it depends on what credence they'll give us at the end of the day, but it would be very remiss of us not to. And knowing the makeup of this council, I think that's a given in any case.
But once they get their hands on Ventnor, then we are in trouble. And once Michael Poland isn't there to police what's going on his lands, that's a whole big, big development area, and then we would be careful.
Yeah, sure. Well, I've declared an interest right there because I've had dealings with Michael Poland before, so I don't want to labour any points there.
So have I.
Okay, so thank you, everybody. Clark, anything to add?
No,
Fact.
I would wonder if I could just ask Councillor Lucas if the planning committee would have a look at this, perhaps on our behalf. Somebody needs to look at it more carefully than anybody, including me, has yet, I think.
Yeah, I don't mind having a look at it, but I don't pretend to understand it, David, at all.
I wasn't thinking of you, Chair.
No, I know, but even if I was that way inclined, which I'm not, I wouldn't pretend to understand the intricacies of it. And I bow to Councillors Lucas and Toogood in that respect.
Shouldn't we have a few weeks to look over it, then set up a Zoom meeting between the councillors? I mean, the planning committee. That's and let everyone bring something to the table.
Well, it ain't going to happen. It ain't going to happen tomorrow, is it?
No, give us time to go through it.
Yeah. Councillor Watling, did you have your hand up there, or were you just changing position? Column.
I was agreeing with Jim.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Okay, we'll leave it there for the time being. Thank you, councillors. Now, the polling districts 2021 consultation. I don't know how many of you have seen that the clerk has, in the reports, given us the drawings and the spreadsheet. We are going to be divided despite the objections that we had at the time, by the look of it, into electoral division letters KK and MM, Ventnor and St Lawrence, KK 1 and 2, and Roxall, Lowtherville and Bonchurch, which baffles me completely, MM1, MM2 and MM3. Now, as I say, I'm kind of baffled by that. I did say at the time that it looked as if it was a done deal, and so it has transpired. But councillors, over to you.
I think the actual areas are less important than the vigour of the councillors that are representing them. At the moment, Gary Pease seems to be doing a good job, but he's not being matched by the other area. So I would think the important thing is they're a strange bunch, Lowtherville, Bonchurch and Roxall. But if somebody with a bit of zumph gets the job, it'll be okay.
Yeah, just to add to what you're saying, Councillor Lucas, I think it wouldn't be such a done deal that Councillor Pertz, for it to see that we are talking about here, would be a shoe-in for the job in future elections because of the Roxall and the Lowtherville make-up, and your end of it in Bonchurch as well. So his fiefdom more or less comes from a line between East Pub and the top of the High Street. Oh, what's that? A hairdryer. Councillor Bond.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm worried we're slightly slipping off the topic here because the ward boundaries were something we discussed a year or two back, and what's done is done, and we can't change that. What this is about is the polling station and the polling district review. And to be honest, the recommendations they've come up with sort of follow inevitably from what was done before. Which members will remember I wasn't particularly happy with at the time. I think the biggest issue for the town is going to be the loss of St Catherine's Church as a polling station for the western end of the town, and they're having to travel to Salisbury Gardens, which particularly for people who need to come by car, presents some practical issues. But I'm not sure there's an obvious solution, given that we do have this very large Ventnor area now, all in one ward.
Yeah. Sure. Ian, thanks for bringing us back onto the straight and narrow there. I completely agree with you. St Catherine's was an ideal polling station, very busy from that point of view. And I think you're quite right at drawing people in up to Salisbury Gardens. It's quite a hike from if you're coming from there up Belgrave Road right up as far as Park Avenue and places like that into Salisbury Gardens.
Well, the problem's going to be having to walk past St Catherine's Street. People will want to drive, to be fair, like many of them do at St Catherine's, where there is a car park. And driving to Salisbury Gardens and finding somebody with the car on an election day is going to be very difficult.
Yeah, it is. Whereas St Catherine's was one or two places that they can park in. So we can make representations along that score as far as the policy. It may be, I don't know this, it may be that St Catherine's was approached and refused to cooperate. I don't know. And maybe other people associated with the church would know that. I certainly don't know. And I don't know whether they would have any leeway if they were asked to provide it as a venue for a polling station, whether if they said no, that would be the end of the matter, or whether the returning or the monitoring officer could say, well, actually, that's where it's going to be. I don't know. Maybe
I doubt it's that, Chair. I think the normal approach that is taken in parish areas is that the parish council ward, you don't go below that for a polling district. And I think Isle of Wight Council will have just approached it in the normal way that Ventnor Ward, or Ventnor, they've now called it Ventnor West, even though effectively it is the whole of Ventnor, will have one polling station. Now, I don't think there's a prohibition on having two polling stations for a parish ward. It would just be very unusual. But there is an argument that you divide the Ventnor ward into two parts. Probably use the old boundary, and keep the St Catherine's polling station as an additional one. Now, obviously, the Isle of Wight Council will be keen not to do that because of cost. But I do think there are some strong arguments about accessibility when you consider that the polling district goes right up Castle Close and right up to the top of where the fish and chip shop is. That's a long way from there to Salisbury Gardens, particularly if you don't have transport.
No, you're absolutely right. It's a fair description of it. Yeah. And the only other one out there is Lawrence Village Hall. I mean, it's a fair old trek out there from, and I don't know where is the boundary, Dealing, do you know? I haven't got it in front of me, for the St Lawrence ward.
It's roughly where the cricket club is, isn't it, I think?
Oh, Steep Hill, yeah.
Past Botanic Gardens.
Yeah. So it's still a fair old trek, isn't it?
Well, yeah, but they're quite fit out here.
Well, because you got to be, I suppose. That's a good comment, Ian. Yeah, I take that completely on board. Anybody else on this? No, David? No. So we can just let them know that we think that the omitting St Catherine's Church is a mistake for the reasons that we've outlined here.
Yep, can do that, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. Right to standing orders. And this came about because of procurement, and the fact the standing orders are long-standing, if you forbear the pun, and hadn't been changed for such a long time.
Chair,
could you come in here, David, please?
just introduce this briefly, Chair, if I may.
Sure. Yeah.
I've
I'm just getting my paper in front of me. Don't worry. Carry on. Sorry.
I've endeavoured with the paper that you've got to follow on the guidance from Councillor Cockett last time, which was to, as far as possible, simplify the choices that need to be made in respect of any additions or amendments to the draft that you considered last time. And so what I've done, as you can see from the paper, is each of the following sections after the first looks at and identifies each of the things that could or should be amended or included or in some other way changed. And then I've summarised that at the end with a recommendation, which I've moved as far as dotty 1, as they call it, is concerned in the recommendation, to suggest that there are some things which can be agreed. I'm not suggesting you shouldn't discuss it or disagree, but could be agreed on the grounds that Councillor Watling and I have shared this paper, and Colin has indicated that broadly they would support most, if not all of it. And those 3 items under dotty 1, I think, come within that category. If that is the case, although feel free, obviously, to amend any of those, dotty 2 identifies the need to be clear about whether contracts in excess of 25,000, this is the line drawn by the regulations that we've been trying to comply with fully, whether they should be or should not be advertised in all cases. I've made the point in the text which refers to that element of the discussion that it is not necessarily, it doesn't have to be done under the regulations, but it can be done. And Colin has made a good case, in my view, in the previous discussions of this, for suggesting that in the interests of transparency, as well as securing best value, it might be useful to incorporate that provision within the standing orders. But that needs a clear council decision from my point of view, because I don't want to come back to this ever again. So hopefully we can.
You both, yeah.
And probably Colin shares the same view of at least that.
I'm just amazed, David, that your health has improved so much despite what we've been talking about.
He's made of stone stuff.
I'm relieved too about that. And the only other element then, if that is the case, is that the drafting needs some care. So dotty 3 is suggesting that I be delegated to draft something in discussion with the Mayor and Colin to be included in the final version of the standing orders, which could then be approved at the October meeting. So that's my introduction, Chair. The rest is over to you.
Thank you. Councillor Watling.
Yeah, I apologise to all the people in the meeting about how boring procurement is. It really, really is. All we're trying to do is get a system so that, just as Jim was discussing earlier on with the toilet block, there's just no danger at all that people think that we're doing the wrong thing. So if we advertise everything, if everything's in the public domain like that, there can be no suspicion. So I think that's a really good thing. And the rest of it is pretty minor, to be honest. I think it's probably worth bearing in mind that the Isle of Wight Council do exactly as I'm suggesting. It's the same source of money. It's the council taxpayers, and they do exactly what we're suggesting: social value, life cycle costing, tender evaluation, and advertising over 25k. So I think doing the same as the Isle of Wight Council does with the taxpayers' money is probably not a bad place to start as a principle. That's really all I had to add.
Thanks, Colin. Does anybody else would like to come in here? Excuse me.
Yeah, I'd like to agree with it totally, the recommendation. I'll give you an example. Our electrical testing certificate has run out of the main offices, so I've actually put it out to tender to free electricians. And I've no doubt it would be a lot less than £5,000, but I think this is a good place to start. I really do. I highly recommend it.
Thank you, Jim. Councillors?
I was a bit concerned about having open advertising for larger projects, because I've been involved in this in the past, way back in the industry, and you get a lot of chances thinking, oh, well, I can break into the big time by doing this. And so it will give us a problem of sifting out people who are realistically able to cope with the project that we have in mind. So bear in mind that if we do an open advertising thing, it needs to be done carefully, because we could give ourselves a lot of work.
Sure, Brian, but I would suggest there that there's enough expertise amongst members, you know, yourself and Colin and Jim and people like that, to ensure that that's something that's minimal going forward. But that's just the way, sorry, Brian, to cut in, but that's just the way I would have responded to that. Sorry, Brian, were you? I cut in you there. Okay, thank you. David.
Just to follow up Councillor Lucas's point, you won't be able to control that, because as you know, if the tender is advertised, it will be included on the contracts, on the contract grant finder contracts. Colin, what's it called? Contracts.
It's just called
Contract finder. Yeah.
So it will be an international advert in that sense, and
Yes.
we'll have to take whatever comes back. That's not a reason for not doing it. It's just to be clear about what is involved. I'd also, Chair, in closing from me, just wonder whether Com might have time to advise the Prime Minister on procurement processes.
I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure we'd all sign that letter. Just something in the back of my head, Clark, and for you as well, Councillor Watling. I wonder if there's any merit in exploring whether to simplify even more by including all contracts from £0 or £1. Why is it 0 to £25,000 and then above £25,000 ad infinitum? I just wondered if it'd be simpler, wording wise and drafting wise, whether we just included all contracts at all costs. Carl,
So-
you put your hand up there.
Yeah, so this is something David and I talked about right at the outset. You need to make it easy for the simple stuff. You know, we should be putting our effort on the difficult stuff. So
Sure.
the 80-20 rule, so 80% of the procurement that we do as a council should just go straight through the books on 3 quotes with none of this being required.
Okay, yeah.
If we want to buy a ream of paper or some post-its or a printer cartridge, there's no need to advertise that. There's no need to even get 3 quotes. We just need to get on with it. It's the big stuff where we should be spending our time and effort. And the threshold that NALC use, that the Isle of Wight Council use, that most people use is 25k for that.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thanks for that guidance, stroke explanation. It all adds up pretty well for me. Councillor Cockett.
So thanks very much to both Colm and David. My reading of the recommendation is that you're in agreement with nearly all points under the first dot, and I'm very, very happy to follow those. It looks like there's still one open question though, which is the second point, to determine whether or not we should use Contracts Finder. In my view, we should be whiter than white. I hope it doesn't become onerous to put the contracts up there, and I hope it does not become onerous when you receive messages back from all and sundry. I don't imagine that you will. I don't think there's many man and van chancers who are looking on the official .gov website to see what they can pick up. So yes, I'm in complete agreement with the recommendation, and like I say, for me, I would go in favour of using the Contract Finder website.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Cockett, for that. Do you have any response to that, David or Colm?
No, sorry, Chair, just to be clear, if as this recommendation suggests, we advertise all contracts over 25,000, we have no choice under the regulations. We must do on contracts.
Must be done that way. Yeah. Well, in that case, it is clear and open. Okay, I think we're in agreement then. Could I have a proposer? Colin, you want to propose that?
I'll second it.
Councillor Stewart seconded it. Anybody against? I take it not. Thank you very much. Well, that was the only part of the agenda that I was really worried about tonight. Thank you very much all for making my life a lot easier. That's and from that we go into the very, very easy Town Clerk's report.
Thank you, Chair. Briefly, 5 items this time. The opening of the office. As the report says, at a staff meeting, we've agreed to reopen the office in the sense of having one member of staff present each day from 9 till 4. It will only be one member of staff unless we choose to make different arrangements on an ad hoc basis. But the plan will be to have one member of staff available because those of us who have used the office occasionally, including me, and certainly Morgan, who's been there a lot throughout, what we know is that we still get knocks on the door from people asking for information or other details. So, and it also makes sense, I think, for us to have a physical connection with the place we're working for, after all. So that's the agreement, and that will start from the 1st of October. For the rest, our digital arrangements seem to be working perfectly well. And as far as I'm concerned, no business has been affected by the fact that we can't have physical meetings, except exceptionally. Toilets, you know about the reopening of Marlborough Street toilets, really pleased about that. And also pleased about the legislation going through Parliament in respect to the business rates on public toilets. That looks just about certain to complete its passage by Christmas, certainly. There's been no opposition to it so far, and that's worth £7,500 a year to this year and future years' budgets. So very welcome. A brief report on the meeting that Bob Seeley held last week, and there's another one this week. 3 issues he raised: the BrickBox filming, which Ventnor will have some involvement with, as you know, as we've already discussed some of that. He thinks that will bring a lot of additional income to the island. Island Line, he confirmed that there is a bid from the island for 50,000 for a feasibility study of the possibility of extending the line from Shanklin to Ventnor and Ryde to Newport. He wasn't confident that the bid will be successful because it's not a huge, well, it's a largish fund, but it's very competitive. The planning white paper I won't refer to again. 31 bus service restarted on the 18th of August as planned. and seems to be running on Tuesdays and Fridays as determined. Alison, we still haven't had the figures for August, have we?
No, not yet, David. I chased Mark up last week and I'm still waiting for those.
Thank you. And the meetings of the working group still doing good work. Thank you very much indeed, Chair. I'm done.
Thank you, Clark. Any questions or otherwise for the clerk on his report? Thank you very much indeed, everybody. Relatively short meeting tonight. Thank you all for your time. And we'll. What you didn't mention there, David, was the fact that the Blanc has been cancelled because of the government's sudden turnaround on groups of 6 and more. So all the good stuff that was going to come to Ventnor in September and October is not going to happen now until some time in the future. But that's just nothing we can do about that. It's a done deal, but it's a shame, really. Thank you all, and have a good week, a good weekend, and see you all soon.
Did you see this afternoon somebody from, I think it was one of the universities